Arteta! What a strike! What a screamer! Zola! And a fantastic goal! Arsenal back in it! And here's Limpar, lines it up, finds the net. Arsenal are in front.
We've been trying to tell everybody for years, but people are finally finding out what Arsenal fans have said is true. Spurs are shit. This is the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast. My name is Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. That's right. What do we think of Tottenham? Shit. What do we think of shit? Tottenham. Now what does everybody think of Tottenham? Shit. Because they're acting like shit. And now they're trying to walk it back, but they still look like shit. All that and more. We're going to be talking about football, and that's what football is. It's really basically just talking about how shit Tottenham are. We're going to talk about Arsenal players being asked to give their money back so that Stan doesn't, go homeless. I wouldn't want that to happen. All kidding aside, we'll sort of have a nuanced debate about that. We'll talk about when football's going to come back. And one other topic that we're actually going to start with, but I'll save it. That's called a tease. I just want to say I hope everybody's safe and healthy and happy and doing okay. I know the longer the stretch is on, the harder it gets, and we all miss the football and we all miss regular life, and we're not going to have that back anytime in the near future, but we have each other. And I just want to say that we appreciate you, and I hope that you are doing well. We'll have some Patreon stuff coming up this week if you're over there. And if you're not, no big deal. But we are going to do a FIFA tournament that I'm going to do live commentary on. I've been trying to figure out the tech side of that. And I think I have it sorted out, which means 2023, that will definitely happen. In any event, Paul's on Twitter at Pause in My Pants. Hello, Pause.
Woohoo!
Clive's on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello.
Tim's on Twitter at Roberto. Hello, Tim.
Hello there.
Hello there indeed. Okay, guys, we got to get to the hot news. The most important thing right from the top. Paul, I'll start with you. I think we need to really just have a considered opinion on what's happening with this, because sometimes people come out with statements and they give their idea about something, and we have a quick sort of visceral reaction. And sometimes you need to take a beat, take a breath, analyze it, and really look at the credibility of what's been said and the analysis of what's been said. So with that sort of caveat in place, Alex Iwobi was asked to name the 5 best players he has played with in his career, and he said Santi Cazorla, Glenn Kamara, Chuba Akpom, Mesut Ozil, and Francis Coquelin in that order. How do you respond to this?
What?
I mean, what do you even do with something like that?
Well, he got Santi Cazorla in there, so
he just hoped nobody was listening after that.
This story is starting to have some legs. So, Santi could take up the first 5 spots, and like Mesut Ozil on a good day. Are we talking about a good day or not?
I mean, look, I'm fine with Mesut Ozil, but the guy played with Alexis Sanchez, Aaron Ramsey, Koscielny. I can't even remember the names of Arsenal players anymore.
I see where this is coming from now, Elliot.
Glenn Kamara, Chuba Akpom. It's the Francis Coquelin thing that's got me, Paul. You know that's where I got hung up.
No, I think it's the Alexis Sanchez thing that's got you all riled up. But I mean, does this make you
seasoned
with a little Francis Coquelin? Yeah, that's a really weird choice.
This is a guy who had trouble making decisions in the final third, and now can we just conclude that like decision making extends far beyond that?
Yeah, well, he wasn't very good at the tracking back thing too, so perhaps that explains his desire to have Francis Coquelin in the mix, cover his ass. But yeah, it's hard to fathom that one, I will grant you. Don't know what more to say. He might have been on substances, I don't know. Maybe it's all getting to him. This isolation, we had a little chat beforehand. I was worried about a couple of you. Tim with his conspiracy theories. Clive seemed to be slowly losing it. We haven't seen for a while. I hear those words, your hair's grown long, your fingernail, you gone all Howard Hughes on us. So I think there might be a little of that with Alex Iwobi here. That makes no sense. But hey, you got Santi Cazorla, so we'll give him some points for that one.
Yeah.
Can I give you a little theory on why he chose those players?
I mean, do you want to give me a toxicology report? Yeah, go for it.
Well, I'll give you a little theory, only because my nephew is in the same academy year as Iwobi for 6 years. So, and I do know that Chuba Akpom was also in that academy year. And I do know that Chuba Akpom was the best academy player we'd seen in the history of mankind for about 5 years. So that may have influenced why he chose Chuba, because Chuba was the star of that group. And he was one everyone thought was going to make it. And Iwobi nearly got released about 8 times, and then he eventually is the one that went the furthest. So sometimes people have an impression on you when you're young. And same for Dan Kamara, by the way. But yeah, just a little theory there. But the others I can't explain.
Tim, do you want to just basically end this conversation by saying it looks like we made the right call to move him on?
I mean, what he's done is he's picked his mates, right? Pretty much. Exactly. I mean, I don't know how well he got on with Francis Coquelin or even Mesut Ozil. I mean, Ozil's a fair enough pick, really, isn't it? Particularly like because players see other players training as well, and a lot of them will form, quite understandably, because it's a bigger data set, they'll form opinions of players based on what they see in training. I'm sure he's just mates with Glenn Kamara. I know he's mates with Chuba Akpom. So, I think that would explain those two. But, the Coquelin one, I don't know. Maybe he just thought... look, maybe he just really rates him and he thinks he's great, and that's fine.
So, now that we've got that out of the way, we can get on to the less important, lighter stuff. Clive, when is football coming back?
It's coming back in Germany, isn't it? They're already training together. But Germany are a sensible country, and they've nailed it on the testing, and they've nailed it on the isolation, and they've
They're all about the process, aren't they?
And guess what? They've been quite efficient with their process, Paul. And they are back training as groups. And I think they're intended to play behind closed doors in early June, I believe. But that could obviously change depending on how things go. But they seem to have a clear plan, and it sort of highlights to us really. It sort of hit me the other day, actually, I know we're going to talk about it a little bit later, when Arsenal came up with the pay cuts for basically a season. It sort of dawned on me, and maybe I've just been a bit stupid, but it dawned on me that we're not going back to the stadium for a long time. Football may come back. We won't be there with hot dogs in our hands watching it. You know what I mean? It's a problem. It's something that's just sort of hit me. I can't see a scenario where we're going to have 60,000 people in close contact with each other in a football stadium again for this calendar year. And you tell me if I'm wrong, right? So I can't see a scenario, given where vaccines are, given the fact that where they have to be tested, for example, to understand how long side effects will take, and distribution to billions of people, 7 billion worldwide. How's that manufacturing going to be ramped up, even if we find a vaccine by September, October this year? So how are we going to get to a place where, with a disease which can be asymptomatic, how can we get to a place where we talk about testing people maybe 500 to 1,000 a day in the UK? We need to get tens of millions tested. I mean, we're not in that situation where football, the way we used to watch it, is going to come back in the near term. And this leads into there's a panic going on. I'm sure we can talk about it. There's a panic going on about how long we're going to miss out on this match day revenue. And I think it's going to be a significant period of time. And I find that, especially people that go to games, like Tim, for example, regularly, it's a big part of their cadence of their life. That's incredibly depressing. And also the product, just watching it, we all watch games and we all look at the back of the screen, and we all look at the crowd and reactions and the sound. It's all part of it. It's all part of the experience. And I think we're going to be watching a sanitized virtual game for a long time. We'll still debate it, but I think we're going to have to adjust ourselves massively about what that experience is going to look like.
Well, if you're one of those people who's inclined to say that Arsenal fans are the worst in the world and that the reason the team struggles is because the Arsenal fans suck, you're probably going to find out if your theory was right, because presumably Arsenal should win the league if it's all behind closed doors. I think this is an incredibly challenging thing to try to pull off, though, because what happens if one team gets one player, their star striker, and tests positive? Then that player has to be quarantined. Well, as we know, by the time they test positive, it could be too late. So what if 10 of the players have it? Does that team just sit out for a few rounds of play? Do they have to field whatever academy kids can play? Does the team they just played against have to sit out in quarantine? I think trying to devise a strategy for this to work until there's vaccines, or massively observed elimination of the virus. I just don't know how you go back to playing, because you can wind up with a situation where one team that's 3 points off the title gets 2 players that test positive, and then they're not allowed to play for a month, and you're right back where you started. I mean, Clive, do you mind if I get some other views on this, or do you want to just quickly chime back in?
I'll just touch it. Maybe some of the other guys may have read what I've read, but they're talking about having specific environments where are biologically controlled. Players stay in hotels for a period of time, almost like a tournament style, which means all the support staff, all the playing staff, all the coaching staff will literally be isolated to play football matches. When they talk about using St George's Park, etc.
But someone's going to get it, right? I mean, it's just someone. A cook is going to get it, or a driver is going to get it, or a room cleaner is going to get it, and one of the players will get it, and one of the teams will get it, and then what? And I'm not saying they're going to die or anything. I'm not trying to be that morbid. I'm just saying, like, then they can't play, or the team they just played against can't play. So Sports Illustrated did an article, and I have to admit, like, they're not medical professionals. They did an article about why sports isn't coming back anytime soon and the challenge with trying to bring it back. And, I do think there's also the point that just, what are you playing for? At the point that you're doing it in front of empty stadiums just to put something on TV, do you have a product anybody even wants to watch? Do you have authenticity to the product? Are you recreating the sport? Because really it's home in a way that makes a difference in sports. Or specifically in football. So have you really recreated anything? Should you create a knockout tournament that's just sort of a one of its kind coronavirus era, sort of super knockout tournament just for fun? Because trying to play a league season, to me, doesn't make any sense, because you're not recreating a league season. So Tim, I mean, in your mind, realistically, when could it come back, and what way would you, if they were trying to do it sooner without fans, to you, does that even make any sense and recreate anything anybody wants, or should they come up with sort of an interim alternative?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I mean, first of all, at the very outset of all of this, and by the very outset, I don't quite mean the very outset. I mean when it became a reality, like for me locally in London, the whole like lockdown thing. I thought to myself, if I enter a football stadium before again in 2020, I'd consider that an amazing result. And if anything, probably at the time, with my absolute zero knowledge about any of this sort of thing, I probably thought in my mind, well, yeah, that seems like maybe a reasonable target, actually. Like, on one hand, I think I was just trying to steel myself for the long term, because I just didn't see any way, like, for all the reasons you just pointed out, that it could come back quickly. But actually, I've revised that mentally now, and I'm thinking, like, any time inside 12 months would be an amazing result, and I'd take it. And like you, I read that Sports Illustrated article, and I've been thinking for some time they'll probably devise some way of doing it behind closed doors, just for the sake of A, getting it done, B, getting the broadcast money, and C, just fucking finishing this season and getting it over with. But I hadn't really given it that much thought until I saw the article, and basically, which really, like, if you haven't read it yet, I'd advise reading it. It actually refers to NFL and NBA, and not football in particular. But I think the same thing holds, that basically, first of all, you have to get all of these different parties to agree to, like, quarantine themselves for 2 weeks, and then go to this quarantine zone for like 4 to 6 weeks to finish the season, which I think is exceptionally unlikely. But like you say, it's so delicate, and it's such a house of cards. It's just very difficult to see how that could happen. And basically, until there's a vaccine, I can't think of a way for football to come back. I just can't. And obviously that sets off all the questions about, well, what the hell are football clubs going to do, for the next 12 months without any income whatsoever? And also that there would be a very serious moral dilemma, even if you thought you could pull something like that off. I think a lot of people would rightly say, well, hang on, you've developed enough testing, because you'd have to test everyone like every day in this like quarantined Premier League super planet that you've created. And I think a lot of people would look and say, well, how come like all this testing is being used for Premier League footballers like to this extent and this volume? Like there would be a very serious moral quandary about that, I think, even if it was practical. And I want to separate that from, because I think a lot of people have kind of been saying, and I get it, they've been saying, oh, this shouldn't even be talked about, it's immoral because of what's going on. But it's kind of like, well, look, the Premier League is like any other business. It has to try and play, it has to try and survive this period, just like any other business that hasn't already gone to the wall. And B, you know, it's a massive employer, the Premier League, and it's not just an employer of highly paid footballers. It employs all football clubs, employ all manner of staff, and so the clubs in the league has a responsibility, even if you think it's all vacuous and horrible and meretricious and all of that. Like, it has a responsibility.
I knew two of the three words. You want to help me with meretricious?
Meretricious is like it's like when something,
he made that one up.
It's when it's like a bit gaudy, you know, like if someone wears like a pink and orange suit with bells and whistles on it, that might be described as meretricious.
Okay.
But even if you think that, like,
a lot of clubs' third strips.
Sorry,
are
Paul. We got to stop. We're gonna get yelled at for interrupting Tim. He was on a roll. Go for it, Tim. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I had to ask.
But even if you think all of that, football clubs employ all manner of people, and therefore the Premier League has an absolute responsibility to try and keep those people in work anyway. And, you know, ultimately, I completely understand if people don't care about this stuff at the moment, in which case you can just ignore it. And it's not like the Premier League are doing like what the government are doing and having like daily press conferences telling everyone. They're having these talks in private, and people are kind of leaking details and journalists are extracting details because there's some level of interest. And if, you know, people that don't share that interest don't have to, they can just ignore it. But anyway, that aside, how all of this, you know, and I read a really good piece by Gab Marcotti as well that was talking about, you know, the prospect of cancelling the season, which I've been dead against for sporting integrity reasons. But actually he made some really good points about, like, you know, it's fine for the Premier League to go off and play behind closed doors and collect their broadcast money. That's not an option for the Championship and League One and League Two and the National League and all of that. They can't afford to do that, and they don't have the broadcast income to back it up. So, yeah, you finish the Premier League, but who the hell... And what about all these teams in, like, mid-table in League One? Like, they'll lose money if they go and play football games behind closed doors. So why would they want to do that? And so there's going to have to be probably a creative solution for finishing the season, unless, like, we just pick it back up in 12 months' time. It might, you know, we might just have to say, well, look, next March, we'll just play all the games we were supposed to play this March. And, yeah, I mean, how and when it comes back, I mean, well, rather, until there is a vaccine and it's been widely enough distributed, and you think about like European competitions and stuff like that. I mean, I think you know, unrestricted travel is off, you know, is off the cards for quite a while. So how you do the Champions League and the Europa League and things like that, I've got no idea. Maybe those things will end up in China. You know, who knows? But whatever it's going to be, and I am curious and I'm fascinated, because whatever it is that ends up happening is going to be mind-blowing, because it's just going to be something completely different that we've never seen before. And were I a marketing creative of some sort, I'd probably look at this as a massive opportunity to try and come up with an idea, because you could get paid if you have it.
Yeah, I mean, you know what I think part of the problem is here, Tim and Paul, this is maybe something we can talk about theoretically and really just get up our own butts for a minute here. Why do we play sport? Why do we have sport? You know, I think there is a tendency to think it's important who won the league. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of these let's get it going again things are sort of like, well, we've got to have a winner. We got to do it. Like, let's be clear about something. Who wins a football league isn't important. It doesn't matter. Like, this is entertainment. This is done so people can have fun watching it. Yes, it is a results-based business, but ultimately, if it wasn't fun And let's be honest, football isn't fun, so why do we watch it? But it used to be fun. I mean, if it's not fun, who cares? And I guess what I'm saying is, like, there is a self-importance to a league thinking it matters who won the league. Like, okay, fine, play some stupid behind closed doors games so you can officially hand Liverpool a title. Like, if it's that important, just tell them they won the title. Like, I think you're sort of getting it wrong here if you think that the outcome is a reason to go do something dumb. So, Paul, like, what is the right reason to reopen? Is the right reason to do it to just be able to say you completed a season? Like, what should the criteria be for them even considering doing this again?
So you raise a lot of good questions, and I think this whole thing raises a lot of good questions because a lot of people are asking to themselves, with all this spare time in their hands that they would otherwise be plowing into football, apart from asking what should they do right now with all this time in their hands, they're thinking, why did I spend all that time on football before?
Yeah.
And it makes you evaluate things. So it'll be very interesting to see if people snap back to what they did before. But I would strongly disagree with, I fully respect the viewpoint you laid out there in terms of it making you evaluate what's important and that football's trivial and blah, blah, blah. But it's not. And there are times when I haven't appreciated this, but football is not trivial. It's an integral part of culture, of society, of the ways people connect. And when you take that away, it's like, well, what is important if football isn't important? It leads you, like the philosophers have come up with the existentialism, absurdism. When you pull away a value system, it's kind of like you remove religion. Oh, well, that'll be fine. We'll all just come up with our own values. We'll all just do the right thing. But religion in the center of a culture has served. Now, I'm not particularly religious these days. I'm not a big God guy.
This is good. This is going in a good place that I definitely want the pod to go. So definitely, let's go down this path as much as possible.
But analogous to suddenly removing religion from the center of a culture, you pull football out of the center of a culture. We don't even begin to understand the values it espouses. Look at the upset and the arguments we get into in terms of what's fair play and what isn't fair play. And we just have this cultural understanding of what's fair. And when you think about football, we have weird ideas about what's fair, like playing to the whistle or what you can get away with. But we do actually have a line in our own minds about what's moral and what's fair, what's a fair tackle. I mean, you can take a guy out, even though it breaks the rules of soccer, of football. You take a guy down. We all think that's a good foul. You just can't try and break his leg. But you can go in hard. So football plays a role in the center of this debate of morals, of culture, of connection, of how we relate to each other. It brings people together. We talk to people from all over the world, like you and me and Tim and Clive. The only reason we're talking is football. We wouldn't know each other. We wouldn't have a reason to talk to each other without football. And like, it's fine for a while, but something has to fill that gap, and eventually football will come back in and fill the gap. What's interesting is it puts a spotlight on how football is changing, and the important, like, the big one is football without a stadium, without a crowd, without the supporters, without the connection between fans. What is that? Is it just a way to see it could serve a purpose to see our way to the end of the season so we can actually get a proper season going with people back in the stadiums, in the crowds, supporting the team, connecting. Because without that, it's nothing. I mean, the idea of Germany finishing their league with, empty stadiums, okay, it's a function to get onto when they'll actually fill their stadiums again. So, what is anything in life? We're not all just here to earn a crust, feed our kids, move on and die. This is the stuff of life, and you don't appreciate it till they take it away.
Yeah, and I mean, it is weird. We've touched on this before, Paul, but the whole opiate of the masses thing, there are a lot of things we need in our life to keep us from just over focusing on or getting excessively concerned about or fixating on the other things. I mean, all of us have issues, health, the health of our family, raising children, economic concerns, job stresses, relationship stresses, losing weight, gaining weight, whatever the case may be. But, these other things that we have in life, like sport, become things that we pour ourselves into. And in some ways, they become a bit of a catharsis for those other issues. And, if you ever wonder why people express such strong opinions on Twitter and get outraged at a player, do this or that, maybe consider what they're going through in the rest of their life and that it's actually healthy for them to be releasing it on football. I have a little more on that, but Clive, it sounds like you have a follow-up there. So
you were going in a very similar direction where I was thinking, really. If you look, I always look at life in almost like we all have pillars running through our life, strong pillars, and they may be work, maybe family, relationships. For me, fitness, for example. I'm not very fit, but also football, sport was a big pillar in my life, right? So. And those pillars almost, I call them like your 5 constants, right? They're individual to you. Right? So the 5 things that really are your life balance. And football and sport and how I consume sport and how I analyze sport and teach sport is a big part of my life balance. So what this period has done is made us all look at our pillars, right, and what we can do. And it's going to be interesting to see how we revert and what our new pillars become. At the moment, a lot of people are doing more exercise, because we can do that. I work from home and I look out my window. I've seen people walking who should not be wearing a tracksuit. I'll tell you that for nothing. Who've never walked, but they're doing it. I've seen people walking with their wives. I've never seen their wives before, right? And that's in 15 years of living in where I'm actually living. So it's changing our structures. It's changing what we care about. But there are people where you spoke about, what does football mean? And Paul really touched on a great point there, saying, will it mean the same? And I can always remember the time when I really realised what football means to people. Tim will have his own various stories. We all have our own stories. But during my youth, I grew up and I went to watch Glasgow Rangers a lot in Scotland. I like taking in football, different countries, etc. So I met some people on holiday. I used to love Ian Durrant and Mark Walters playing for Rangers back in the day. And I went to watch a few games. And then I actually went to a few Celtic games, Old Firm games. I went abroad to watch Rangers, and I watched them in Champions League. But I also went to a cup final, and I saw how they consumed football up there, an Old Firm cup final, and what it means religion-wise, and what it means to be a Rangers man or a Celtic man. And it dawned on me that there are many, many millions of people that are absolutely defined by the team they support. It is their life. It is everything. They haven't got 5 pillars. They've got 1 or 2. Do you see what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it really is everything. And I think those people right now are really hurting. Mm-hmm. And I've seen it. I've been to orange marches. I've seen people absolutely defined to a team and a way of life and a way of being. And when you see that and you realize it, you think, oh my God, I love the game, but not like that. Do you know what I mean? Not like that. It's like,
Wenger was always great about talking about this, wasn't it? Wasn't he? The importance of football in people's lives, and like that's when you think of a guy with a moral and philosophical approach, the respect he always held for football in the importance of people's lives, and you just got a feeling that he got that from his community, from his town. From the Strasbourg area, the importance and the central role that football played in a community that wasn't always so religious in France.
Great point.
Yeah. So, Tim, let me just ask you personally, because I think you're someone who has a very personal connection with this issue, vis-a-vis the extent to which you go to games. Do you want to, not to just make this all about you, but let's make it all about you. Like, maybe you can sort of be an avatar for the match-going fan in terms of, like, let's say next month they said you have to wear a mask, but the stadiums are open. Like, I guess, what would it take for them to get your business back, for them to get you back in the ground? Like, when, as someone who's made this their life, I'm guessing that you're going to have a greater, less elasticity than some people. When would you go back?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. That's something my wife and I have discussed recently. Like, we were talking about, even when all of this is over, right? When are people going to be confident enough to go to crowded shopping centres and cinemas and things like that? I mean, I imagine that there'll be a phased reintroduction of things like that. And I was reading something, in China, they're now really trying to get people to go shopping, because all the shopping malls are open, but nobody's going to them, which I imagine is part because of the financial kind of effects, but, partially because people are scarred by the idea of gathering. I mean, for me personally, I wouldn't pay it too much mind in that, and that's not just because like I'm a junkie for football. Like, I'll be honest, I've been all right during this period. I really have. Of course, I've missed it, but it hasn't been like absolutely desperate. And I suspect it's just a little bit because, to be honest, I think I've expressed on this podcast many times before, there are a few things that were pissing me off about it, vis-a-vis kind of television broadcasters changing kickoffs and blah, blah, etc. Old ground that I don't want to cover again. But also, I guess, and here's where my answer slightly changes. I've got other things going on in life at the moment.
Mm-hmm. You have a baby on the way.
Exactly, yeah, in July. So, like me and Debs were talking about today, and we were like saying, let's say like by some absolute miracle, they just said, COVID's gone. It's all gone. Off you go. Like, we were saying, yeah, until late July, I'm not fucking doing anything at all, because, until that baby's born, and even afterwards, it's a bit like, well, I'm not doing anything to endanger that. And I was even, talking about like, when do I get on a train again and go back into central London? I mean, in my mind, I've written that off until paternity leave comes in July for me. So I think, like, for me, I still think it will be a case of as soon as it's kind of good to go. And if it means like wearing a mask and gloves and stuff, then yeah, fine, I'd do that. I'd maybe not do it for every single game. And again, that decision would be informed by stuff I have going on in life as well. Mm-hmm. But I might just take like a more relaxed view to it and say, well, do you know what? I don't have to go to every game anyway. And if we come to a stage where, they cap stadium attendances and things like that, they might have to do things anyway. Like say, do you know what? We can only fill the stadium up like for 20,000 each time. So there might well be some kind of like roulette involved anyway. They might say, well, look, these season ticket holders, you can't go this week, I'm afraid, because we're only allowed so many people in the stadium. So I imagine a lot of things about it are going to change anyway. Don't get me wrong, like the first sweet hit, I will want to be there front and center. After that, I don't know, maybe I'll be like, well, do you know what, I can do without this for 3 weeks or something. Or, quite frankly, I kind of work at the women's games as well. And I might say, well, that's a kind of, I've started to think this anyway. That's kind of a nicer environment. And, it's like 1,500 people instead of 60,000, and they're not all thoroughly miserable to be there and hate everyone and everything. And there are a number of directions I think I could go that I might have gone anyway, to be honest, before all of this happened. But I think in answer to that, the first time, like, let me through the fucking doors no matter what. But after that, I might take a more relaxed view on it.
Paul, before we move on to just remind everybody that Spurs are shit, let's talk a little bit about what's going on in our own home.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean like specifically your home, and I don't mean specifically your boudoir, and I don't mean specifically anything of a sort of private and personal nature. I mean, at Arsenal.
No worries there.
Although you can share that if you want. So the players have been asked to take a pay cut, and basically they balked at it. Some seemed like they were willing to do it, some weren't. I have some fairly strong opinions on this only because I find it's best in life to only ever have strong opinions on anything. But I'm curious to get your take on what's been asked of them, whether it was appropriate to ask them that, whether the player's reaction was right. I mean, this is complicated and it needs to be unpicked, I think, a piece at a time. So you want to take a first stab at it?
Well, first, it's refreshing to be able to get all wound up about dumb stuff again, football related wise, to take your life off real problems real people have. But hey, here's two bunches of rich people with loads of money squabbling over how they divide the spoils. So there's one part of me that says, that's kind of other people's problems. You down with OPP?
Yeah, you know me,
Elliot.
Yeah,
you know me. Mm-hmm. So it's like, it's nice to have other people's stupid stuff, the soap opera of football, to get all riled up about. But on the other hand, it affects our club, and eventually we're going to care going forward how much money we have. There are clubs who will be in a better position to handle this, and clubs who will be in much, much worse position to handle it. I think Sheffield United have something like 170% of their revenue is spent on wages. In other words, they're way overpaying their players. I think that massively impacts the structure of this discussion at the moment. It's not really specific. The current discussion isn't really an Arsenal discussion. It's a league-wide discussion, even though it's club to club. Everybody's got a very similar starting point across the club. So who knows where this discussion will go in the end. This is kind of the opening gambit. I hope it's done in the right spirit. There's talk about, taking care of existing employees as part of this overall negotiation, so that beyond the players and the playing staff, the staff of the club are taken care of. And with the huge amounts of money we're talking about, that obviously is something that the club and the supporters and the players should all be able to get behind. Whatever the answer is, it should not be furloughing half the club on minimal or no wages. So that needs to be a portion of it. But absolutely, so like the fundamental disagreement seems to be at the moment whether they defer payments and wages or whether the players take a cut. And just my personal opinion, the players need to take a cut, and everybody who gets
something
paid,
to argue about.
Yeah, they absolutely need to take a cut.
Yeah, I totally disagree.
And the executives at the club need to take a cut, and anybody earning above paying their mortgage and the grocery bills should take some kind of cut, and it should scale. Mesut Ozil and Joe Willock or Ainsley Maitland-Niles should not be taking the same amount of cut. I would suggest anybody who believes in doing the moral thing, be it Ozil, Aubameyang, or anybody on elevated wages, should be willing to step forward and cover the little guys within our team and to cover the employees. Otherwise, it's all hypocrisy. Similarly, on the
Can I ask you a question before you move on? Why?
Yeah.
Why should they do that?
Because it's the right thing. Because otherwise, we're not in this together. How do they earn their money? They earn their money from this club that is supported by people the world over, by broadcasting, by commercial revenues, all of which to some degree, and some of which to a large degree have disappeared. They are paid because the supporters come along, the supporters watch, and because the supporters care about the employees of the club. It's their club. It's the lifeblood of the club.
Sure, I care about everybody, not just the employees of the club. I care about all human beings being taken care of and being able to survive and have a roof over their head and health care. And, labor is not responsible for paying labor. That's just not their job.
But the circles, but then there's no club. There's no us.
Why?
Why is there no club, no us? Because either we're in this together.
There's a billionaire at the top of it who could pay all these people till the end of time. Okay, that's who should pay.
Sure, but let's come to once you throw the billionaire in, you lose all sensible conversation.
Why should labor pay for him? Why should they take him out? Why should he get a free? He has the money. They are labor.
But can can we at least
I'm sorry, I
deal
got
with
too
the
heated there. I
club,
apologize.
the executives, and the players? Because whatever Stan does
So,
is
so
its
Paul,
own
can I
argument.
distinguish something? If a player wants to donate some wages to a cause or even to other workers, I would, of course, support that. And I certainly think people who are wealthy in a time of need should consider how they can help voluntarily. Should management be able to require labor to give money back to management that management could easily simply take from themselves? Absolutely not. If a human being wants to help other human beings because they are good and kind,
can't.
Paul, this isn't saying to the players,
Management can't.
donate.
This
is the club saying, give us back some money, and we just need it because boo-hoo, we're poor, and they are not poor, and they do not need it.
But Arsenal is a club that lives within its own means, and the executives.
This isn't
hang
a
on,
business need.
Whoa! Let
Okay,
me
yes,
unfold
yes,
the point.
yes.
Let me unfold the point.
I apologize. My bad.
This is a self-financing club. That's the way it has worked. That is fundamental to the core of the way the club works. I personally like that. My issue is more with other clubs, with oligarchs, with the owners putting money in there. But let me leave the ownership and Stan's role for a second, because I don't think he should get off scot-free. But within the club itself, there are 200 million of the wages are through the players. Huge chunk of it is through the best paid players. And if there's a we in this, if there's a squad, if there's a team, if there's a belief that we're in this together from some standpoint, then it shouldn't be some anonymous donation from those who feel they should or shouldn't. It's absolutely appropriate for the clubs to go to the players as a group. The players stand up as a group. They have the PFA, they have representatives. So let's not pretend they all want to be treated as individuals. So that's maybe what it degrades to. It's absolute deferral is like deferral doesn't do anything for anybody except help a little with cash flow, but it doesn't solve the problem. The problem still comes back to the club. If my company says to me, "Hey, Paul, would you like to be paid a month early in June?" You know, I may not say yes, because in July I'm fucking screwed. So deferral's deferral, but it doesn't solve the problem. Now, if you want to chat about Stan, that's fine. But Stan's got some big issues. All his money is in sports and entertainment, so he's got a problem there, or property, retail, all those kinds of things. So I'm not trying to... you can get all riled up about Stan all you like, but I don't think he's going to be running around to the LA, the Rams, or any of his other clubs and throwing a bunch of money into them. He's going to say, guys, manage yourselves, work through it, negotiate, come up with a plan to keep your business on track. You know, he's borrowed a shitload of money along the way. I think it's way too easy of us to say, oh, well, Stan should just take his X billions. I don't know how much he has on the sidelines, but I certainly don't anticipate that's going to be the answer for Arsenal. So Arsenal has to look at itself, the executives, the playing staff, the staff in general, the supporters, the fans, come together. It's totally reasonable for for Mesut Ozil, for Aubameyang to say, I'm paid because of football, because players come, because of sponsorship, and I want this club to be successful, and I want our staff to be employed, and I want the club to come out and have a chance to push on in the next season, rather than be hamstrung for the next 3 seasons while Chelsea, City, United, etc. push forward because they pull money out of nowhere.
I mean, if there are further distances apart you can be than a pole, opposite poles, that's how far apart we are in this. And I respect how you've explained your position, and I think everything you've said makes sense, but it doesn't connect to me in my worldview in any possible way. So I
Okay,
struggle.
but if we accept Stan isn't going to put money in.
I don't accept that. I do not accept that, period.
But you have to accept it
I don't.
because he's not going to do it.
Then the players should keep their fucking money. Keep every penny of it. They earned it. They bargained for it. They negotiated for it. Keep up with it. Keep it. I'll explain my position in a second because, Paul, I think you've explained yours articulately and effectively, and I understand what you're saying. It's not that I think you've made a bad point or a point that is wrong. It just, I see it differently, and I'll explain in a moment. But Clive, why don't you break between the two of us? And again, I want to be clear, Paul. I'm not patronizing you. I'm not saying like good job patting you on the head. I think everything you said makes sense logically and is a point that I think a lot of people will agree with, and I don't. And it's not because I think it's dumb or wrong. It's just not how I see it. So I'll explain why, and hopefully people will have the patience to bear with me in that. Clive, why don't you come in here though for a second?
Yeah, there's so many sides to this. I'm not sure if there's a right or a wrong, but if I just break it down simply, right? Our business is run by revenue in versus revenue out. We've lost our revenue in. So we're looking at our revenue out column and we have a wage bill, right? So we need to look at how we can cut that wage bill. Now, our income has disappeared, not just our income, but everyone's income has disappeared. We lost our match day income, which is probably the second highest in the Premier League. I mean, Smith Ramble done a great piece in the last 2 days, which outlines all the numbers.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Yeah.
And then as a football player, these 0.11% are special human beings with special talent. And if you're really lucky, you get to a top club that can pay you this life-changing money, and they negotiate their contracts in good faith, and suddenly this has happened. I think, damn, I'm going to be retired. I will not be working again in 5 years' time, for the rest of my life, potentially. This money is important to my family, to my family's family. And so it's a natural reaction for players to internalise. What the problem with Arsenal is with this situation, in my opinion, is they tried to fix too many things. They've tried to look ahead to try to get them to a situation to plan by putting a wage cut in. So from a club perspective, I can see it. Absolutely, I can see it. Do I agree with it? Well, I don't quite agree with it because it's not a complete picture. It feels as though the players are the first ones to pay a price, when I think it should be more of a collective picture. What are our board doing? What are our key wage earners in the executive level doing? I know there's a potential relaxation of FFP coming, but it's not been relaxed yet. So the Stan question can't be addressed. He can't pile money in because he's not allowed to pile money in.
I will just chime in to say I think that is convenient, and that I think that everybody knows that no one's going to be prosecuted for that.
I will say that I hope. I will say that, yeah, it may be convenient, and the best is the truth. And then when I think, there's opportunity for him to pile money in, there are rumours he has put money in the last couple of years. I can't find a balance sheet, but there are rumours out there that he has facilitated some of the transfers in the last year and made sure they can actually happen since he become the sole owner. So there's opportunity there. And I think the most important thing out of all of this is we need to decomplex this a little bit. We're trying to fix too much with the player deal. But also the most important thing, and it's something that I listened to the manager on this, it's important what club comes out. So Paul's point is he's searching for unity. He's searching for a club to be a club. It's very important the club don't just become opportunist to fix the ills of their rubbish contract negotiations over the last 3-4 years. The fact they've got very average players in the main on big money. They have a wage bill which is not value. We're working towards trimming that down. The numbers are out there today. I'm sure they'll be different next year when it comes to wage bill, because we removed a fair chunk off the wage bill last year, and that process would have continued if the market was available this year, but we're not too sure what's going to actually happen. But it's the club's mismanagement that's highlighted these players. It's not their fault. It's not Callum Chambers' fault that he was earning the same money as Christian Eriksen last year. But that's the facts, So it's not his fault. We paid him it. We gave it to him. We gave Mesut Ozil that contract. It's our fault we've mismanaged our finances. It's our fault we've mismanaged our recruitment and contracts renewal. And so there's a suspicion growing. The suspicion between the layers in the club is the thing that concerns me the most, because no club. We were just seeing some unity with the manager that we all believe in. We were just seeing that. This has come along. And what we can't see is a breakup between the layers, between the ownership, the fans, the players. which basically make the club, right? So I think that's the key thing, Elliot. Can we get that? Can we retain some form of unified front? And if that requires players to take a pay cut, I'm okay with it. If that requires the players to take a deferral, I'm okay with that. But the most important thing is the outcome. The process needs to be smarter, but the outcome needs to be that we are not a club that's broken. Because I truly believe we have a manager that can take us somewhere. But if we break ourselves as a club, we're going to lose something, which on the sporting side, when everything comes back, whether it's virtual or not, we need to hold on to this, what we're seeing going forward, because the reason why we all love the game, we've gone through a few peaks and troughs recently, and we all sense there's a peak coming, and that momentum has been lost, but it can't be lost because we're now bickering over dollars and pounds at a time when we haven't got a collective front coming forward. And I think we all support Arsenal Football Club. You know, we don't support any specific aspect of the club. We support the whole club. And I think that being whole at the end of this is the most important thing.
Yeah, I think you walk a very tight rope, a slippery slope, when your decision whether someone is labor or not is based not on whether they are in fact labor, but how much they make. You're labor or you're not. Now, I'm going to come back to that point in a moment because we've frozen Tim out way too long. So, Tim, tell me why I'm wrong as well, so that then when I express my opinion, I will know exactly from all of your responses how wrong and stupid I should feel.
This actually won't take that long because I fundamentally I agree with you, Elliot. I think labour is labour, and even if it's very well paid, but look, the reason the labour is very well paid is because it brings a lot of money in, and so you can say that like they're well paid for a reason, right? They're well paid because they bring shitloads of money in, and obviously, like I understand what clubs are saying at the moment in terms of, well, yeah, we're a high revenue business. That doesn't mean we're a high profit business, because the more like the broadcasters give us, the more we end up giving to agents and players, and I get all of that, but that's maybe not so much agents, but players. That is where it should go. That is where stuff like broadcast money, gate receipt money, they should be the biggest recipients of that money, because they are the reason it exists. They are the reason we pay for those things. So it's right that
but
they
when
take
that
the bulk of
disappears,
that.
shouldn't they take a hit?
Well,
No, because
yes.
they never
Well,
do. If you sign a player to a terrible contract, Mesut Ozil, you don't get it back. If football became less popular, you don't get it back. You don't get back what you negotiate with labor.
But they don't have to do anything. This is what they agree to do, and they should agree. They don't have to, but they should agree to do it, because as Tim outlined, the reason they got paid all that money was on the shared belief that people would be showing up, that football would be played,
they are
that
letting
commercial
the club
revenues
keep the money owed to them, presumably so that money can go to other people in the club. And I would submit to you that if the players say no,
keeping all that
the
money
club
because
will
the stadiums
still
aren't filled.
give it to those. Hang on, I'll finish that point in a minute. But Tim had like 2 sentences and we cut him off. Tim, finish, please.
Yeah. But I also I think where Paul's coming from is perfectly valid as well, in terms of they get paid to play football, and there is no football at the moment. So they're basically being paid to do nothing at the moment. And look, that's why companies are furloughing people, right, and laying people off, because they're basically saying, well, we haven't got any work for you anymore. And that is the case for footballers. They do not, that there is no work for them to do. There are no games. So it kind of, does put like a bit of, but obviously because they're massively high earners, they can't be furloughed, and clubs won't lay them off, because once all this starts up again, they don't want to have to, it's more expensive to go and buy them all back, or have a big free for all and see if you can buy loads of footballers because they've all been like released from their contracts. And I think ultimately, right, my sense is genuinely that most of the players wants to do the right thing. We've seen that with the NHS thing that the PFA or that the players agreed? Because obviously this is all very, very complicated, and like different players earn different amounts of money, and chopping in 12.5% of salary means a lot more to Bukayo Saka than it does to Mesut Ozil, and et cetera, and it all becomes very granular. But I believe the players want to do the right thing. But what it sounds like is they want to make sure, they want to make the contribution, which I think Paul's right on that respect, and I think they should. I don't think you can force them. That's where I agree with you, Elliot. I don't think you can say, well, you've all got to do this, because that's not really the spirit of the thing anyway. But really, what
Tim,
players are trying to do is trying to make sure the money goes to the staff, which I think is exactly the right thing, and not to the owners, which again I completely agree with.
But does that not lead to what I was talking about, Tim, about the mistrust? When you have suddenly there's a mistrust. So I project my feelings, think, well, actually, that's being highlighted, the gap between the trust. They don't trust the board. They don't trust their reasonings. They don't trust where this money's going. They want to control it. And that, to me, tells me there's something else happening there in the background. The fact that we're the ones that have made, we got clever and made our cut. No one else is having a cut. We're having a cut, and we made it performance related based on where we ended up in the league. So we've complicated the situation. We've added variables and then asked people to tick or cross. And you think, hold on, how are you going to get unanimous decisioning based on this complex variable around performance-related pay, a cut, depending where you finish in the league? Players just go, sod that. Speak to my agent. Say, don't sign that. Don't do that. Just sit on your hands. We don't know when we're playing yet. We don't know when we're training yet. The longer this goes on, the greater chance you're going to keep more of your money. Don't do nothing. That's just, now we're seeing layers separating, division.
And because also from the point of view of the players, like they will be saying at the moment, well, you don't even know what your losses are yet. We don't know when we're coming back. We don't know, like, you don't even know how much you've lost. So I'm certainly with them that this looks pretty opportunistic.
It's extremely opportunistic. Let's be clear.
Yeah. And like you say, when you introduce the performance side of it, well, a lot of these players will be saying, well, hang on, I get a bonus anyway if we qualify for the Champions League. So what you're effectively saying now is you're taking away my bonus, but you're not saying that in as many words. And I completely agree. I think this looks like, maybe on the back of this, there's an opportunity to manage some of our really poor decisions. And this is where I come down on Elliot's side.
It's cheap PR. I'm sorry, Tim, was that your final point there?
Yep.
It's cheap PR at the expense of labor. Look, there's a lot of ways companies can raise money. Anybody know what interest rates are right now? Anybody?
0.01%.
Yeah, zero. They're fucking nothing. You can borrow money. You can issue shares. You can do an equity raise. I'm sorry, you don't get to be 100% owner anymore, but you raise millions of dollars and you give that to people to keep sustaining the club.
But
there are other ways you can
mortgaging your future.
No, it is not at
free money.
0.1% interest. It is free fucking money.
You still got to pay it back.
So what are you talking about? It's free. It's free money.
If I pay for 2020 with a loan, I got to pay it back in 2021, 22, 23. It's not free money.
It is free money. You just have to make the carrying costs, which are nothing.
You still got to pay it back.
You don't have to pay it back. That's not how companies borrow.
What are you talking about?
That's not how companies borrow money. They issue debt too. That's not how they. These aren't credit. These are credit facilities.
Ozil is earning money for not playing football and not having people
so
in the stadium.
So do injured
and he
players.
Leaves
they
the
earn a
club,
paycheck in
and
the
then
summer.
Arsenal pays back the money, basically taking money out of what they could have paid future players. Of course, it's future money. It does suck.
I mean, here's the reality.
We're all in it together. We should all take a bit of a haircut.
So should Maitland-Niles take a haircut?
Yes, a smaller one than
well, they're asking 12% from everybody.
Yeah. Excuse me, how much does Maitland-Niles earn for playing football?
Should Emil Smith-Rowe take a haircut? What about the kids who just signed their first professional contract who make $80,000 a year? Should they take a 12% hit?
No.
What about the ones who make $60,000 a year? Should they take a 12% hit? Should we do 20% for the 10 million guys and 40% for the 30 million guys?
I suppose
it's a slippery slope.
Details. No, but we don't. Yeah, let's
but the first step,
we don't know those
thing
details.
We should recognize is we assume it's acrimonious between players and clubs
because the club's taking advantage and using it as a PR opportunity to say, "Oh, the players don't want to give money back."
Excuse me, what kind of irresponsible club wouldn't approach the players at this point and say, "Let's begin a discussion. Here are our thoughts on it." It doesn't seem that acrimonious at this point. It may be in 2 or 3 weeks' time. The players have taken a position that's consistent with the other players in other clubs that are in different situations. So first we got to see how it plays out a little bit. Maybe they're not a million miles apart. Maybe it'll all turn to a shower of shit. But it's not unreasonable. It's responsible for a business in which 70% of its expense is player money or 60% is player wages, to bring up the topic and the conversation, because it's not going to get resolved in one hit.
All right, so let me ask you a question.
Point.
Let's say the players say no. And so they say no. And the club wants to
remember,
that's fine.
An
they say
equal
no.
number of players are open to the idea of a pay cut as are against it. So it's not completely ridiculous here.
Absolutely. I think that people who are well off have a responsibility to give back. I don't think this is how they should do it, but I think they have a responsibility to give back. I think this is labor having their money taken at a weak moment by management because management sees an opportunity to get money back from labor.
What labor means.
Labor are people who work for a living, and whatever amount of money you make, these people work for a living at playing football, and they are paid by someone much richer than them and an organization much better capitalized than them and with much greater resources. The club is owned by KSE. So let me ask you a question. If the players say no and KSE decides we want to keep all of our employees on and continue to pay them 100%. KSE can do that, and there are a variety of ways they can fund that. Choosing to take that money back from one segment of their labor is a choice. And it is a choice that they would make because they feel they have labor with their backs to the wall a little bit. It's bad PR if they say no. They're not playing right now, so people aren't going to be as sympathetic to them. It's a chance to get money back. Let me ask you this. So Mesut Ozil's going to say, okay, take $10 million from me because I'm not playing. What is the size of the check? Hang on. You said that we're self-sustaining. What check is Stan going to write? If Mesut Ozil's giving 12% back, what's 12% of Stan's earning? Let's get 12% of his.
Let me explain that to you, Elliot.
Sure.
Mesut Ozil is losing no money at the moment. Stan Kroenke is already losing money because his money is out of his sports business and its profit and its revenue generation and its value, and it has taken a massive hit. So to have the idea that this hasn't cost Stan Kroenke anything is naive and says you're so caught up in capital, you don't understand how capitalism works. You're so caught up in worrying about who's an employee, what's your term for it? Labor?
Labor.
It is hurting Stan. He's probably shitting himself. Now, don't get me wrong.
I assure you he is not. He's fine. And he can get all the money he needs for free.
You say that, but to say that this does not impact Stan and that he's fine and this has cost him nothing is naive. Now, I don't give a shit about Stan, but the reality is the club is self-standing. Pardon?
What does it cost him?
Profit.
Where?
Revenue,
How?
Value of his shareholding.
His assets are going to be worth just as much in short order.
No, they're not. We've already talked about how this will be a reevaluation of pretty much everything within football. Is the next go round with the broadcasting? You think they're going to walk into that with let's up it by another 30%?
Well, look, we'll wind up going down a road we don't necessarily want to.
That's a good point, actually. And this is another reason why the players potentially are holding out, because they know what's coming. They know that Arsenal take around 3-4 million a game from match day revenue that's going to be reduced for a year and a half, maybe potentially. Let's just think worst case scenario. So they know that the next time they're going to negotiate a contract, wherever they go, they're probably not going to get better wages than they're on right now. So it's very hard for them to think that they're the only ones paying. I do think the club need to think about a unified message. I really do. I don't like the way this story has broke, because one side of the story has broke. So we're thinking this is the club's priorities, because that's a natural thing to do. It does feel a bit Arsenal, if I'm honest with you, the way we've approached this. It feels a bit of the new Arsenal. We want to be a bit clever. We want to be the ones that are looking further ahead. I do think in a couple of months' time, when we realise that we're not going to have people in ground, there's going to be more people thinking, how can we plan a business unless we understand what we're paying out the door and understand when we have to pay it back, for example. So there does need to be some movement. Otherwise, there will be no football club. It's as simple as that. Potentially, the whole thing could be under threat. The whole league integrity could be under threat. It won't just be, clubs like Arsenal, for example. We look at the top 6 revenue, and it's way above the rest of the league. But there's a lot of teams in that league that are in a desperate state. And Arsenal should be one of the people that are leading the way on the best way to approach this as a so-called Bank of England football club. But actually, I can't help but feel we look a little bit opportunistic the way this has broke.
What do you think about the fact that they went to the players and didn't go to their representatives and tried to keep their agents out of it?
I don't know. I don't know that side of things. We haven't got. I would like to see from the top down a message come down about what we're doing as a club, a unified message, a number of things that we're doing to support this period, support other people in the club, support the institutions. They've done a lot of things. Little small messages about what they're doing in the local community, really good things. They've not really highlighted it. This is what's been highlighted. We need to own our message, a much more collective message. This is what we're doing locally. This is what we're doing for the National Health Service. This is what, as a club, we're doing from a board level. And this is what our players are doing to support other people in the club on lower wages. And get hold of this, control it. Control the message, because right now the reason why 2 good friends have a little chip at each other is because that message is not controlled. It's been sent out in a way to cause exactly what we've just seen on this podcast, a discussion and an argument point amongst fans. And I think the club need to be much smarter than that. And what disappoints me is they're not. And my worry is I don't want Arteta and people that I really care about in the club to turn around and say, well, what sort of club is this? Does that mean I want us to be better than this, to be classy than this? I don't want to be doing this way around, because I've, again, listened to what David Ornstein, for example, he says Arteta is firmly closer to the players on this. So we need to be better and realise what we have and who's important, and make sure we're unified and we come out of a unified front which suits the key people in the club, and make sure the fans don't look as stupid as the Spurs and Liverpool fans looked a week or so ago.
I can't help myself when I see a crisis that leads to a downturn in revenue for organizations. It seems to me that while on the one hand, those organizations are getting bailed out left and right, getting access to cheap money, getting all kinds of opportunities to take good care of themselves, the immediate response is always to use it as an opportunity to claw back money from labor, to use it as a way to rebalance the responsibility, a way to pass the burden on to labor. And I certainly think that basically saying to the players, well, if you want all these people to be able to stay employed, you guys need to give back, is opportunistic in light of the fact that there are other ways that can happen. And the simple proof of that is that if the players choose not to give this money back, whatever it amounts to, let's say you have a 200 million wage bill and you get 12% of it back, so you're getting 22 million, 24 million pounds, okay? If you didn't get that 24 million pounds, it's a pittance. It is a pittance. 24 million pounds isn't even the transfer fee for a good midfielder, okay? It is a pittance. And it is an amount that the club has a number of ways to come up with and a number of ways to inject into its wage bill to keep those people employed. But choosing to go around the players' designated representatives to sort of corner them at a time when it paints them as having to have a responsibility for keeping these other people employed is opportunistic. And I think that we make a dangerous decision when we distinguish based on amount earned whether someone deserves to be viewed as, a worker or not. because there are certainly people at the club who are employees of the club, not footballers, employees, who make more money than some of the footballers. And I'd question whether they're being asked to give 12%. What is Raul's deferment? What is Raul being asked to give back? I would imagine nothing. What about Vinay? What is Vinay being asked to give back? Well, it is an assumption. I'd love to know. I think it's important. And it's not just that. Again, this is where I do think Stan comes in. It is all the way up and down the chain of an organization. There are ways that companies can fund themselves. There are ways they can solve problems. There are ways they can do things. And when we say how much 12% of the wage bill really winds up being, I would question whether it has to come from the players. And you can say, look, well, they're not playing. When they're injured, they're not playing. When it's summer, they're not playing.
Dan's going to lose more than 12.5% of his earnings this year, so don't worry.
And I don't care. Because, see, that's the other thing that I think is different.
Everybody gets a haircut.
When you sign up to be a footballer, one of the risks you take is you might break an ankle or like Diaby and never play again. When you sign up to be an asset owner, one of the risks you take is that you will take losses on your assets. So, I mean, these are
things. And he is.
And he is. But that doesn't mean that to mitigate your losses, you should ask labor to voluntarily give you some money back. Again, they have a contract to pay him a certain amount. It doesn't say when times get hard, let me pay you less so I lose less money.
But the discussion isn't what does the contract contain. It's what should people do morally.
Give money to the NHS. Give money to a local food bank. If they want to give back some salary to the club and contractually designate it. See, because that's the thing. If I'm giving my money back, I'd say, I'm not going to take it in deferment of this or that. I want a contract that says who this money is going to, and I want to see that it goes there. But just letting the club reduce your salary 12% because of hard times, to me, is a bad way to do things. And it is an opportunistic move by the club. And Paul, I'll let you have the last word, but then I think we should take 10 seconds to criticize Spurs, because we can all get on board with that, and then call it. And I do want to apologize for my part for getting heated. I think I am wound up because I do see things happening in my own country where workers are struggling to be given the money they need to survive while the Fed is printing money for asset holders to buy ETFs and buy junk bonds. And there's a $500 million bailout of companies that is going to have no oversight over it here. And we are privatizing profits and socializing losses like we always do. And then we're worried if we give $1,200 to a worker, it'll disincentivize them to work. We take far more of a hard look at how workers behave in times of crisis and how they get taken care of than we do how asset holders behave and how they're taken care of. And I think society is set up to serve those people so much better. And I can understand someone listening to this saying, I don't understand how you're going to equate that with Mesut Ozil making all the money in the world. But I do, again, think when you are paid to do a job, you are at some level labor. And whether we draw the line at $35 million a year or $350,000 a year or $35,000 a year, we should understand it is the asset holders, the asset holding class that has access to a lot of resources, and that whenever they go after money from labor, we should be skeptical of it and examine whether it is something they have to do or whether it is something they are doing opportunistically. So that's my soapbox. I apologize. I got way too worked up for this, but who says we can't have a heated debate in the midst of no football? Paul, I apologize certainly if I came across as aggressive with you. I always enjoy debating you. So I will give you the last word on this, and for my part, certainly I obviously respect your opinion as being intelligent, thoughtful, and having a lot of merit, of course.
Likewise, and I hope you don't... Basically... I guess I'd say if the club is something, then we're in this together. Now, where does the club start and end? It needs to include the fans. It needs to include the executives, the ownership, the players, the playing staff, and those who are able to, and the players are certain among that, and the executives are among that, need to put back in a part of it. We're talking about 12.5%, something that apparently as many players thought was reasonable as unreasonable. And I would suspect that a number of those who said no at this point is because it's solidarity with the rest of the league. It's not the same at Sheffield United as it is at Arsenal. So if you're Hector Bellerin and you're representing the players, then you have to look a little broader. than just what works for you within Arsenal. You're also talking to your colleagues, your peers at other clubs and saying, well, actually, I can't break lines at this stage. I can't say yes to 12.5% if that means I'm going to hurt players who are further down the league on smaller salaries. So it's a difficult conversation at this stage because we don't know where the fault lines are. We don't know where the lines are at all. How much of the disagreement is on principle across the league as opposed to at Arsenal for individual players. You would like to think that the players would say, you know what, we know how we make our money. We make it from football, from fans come to the stadiums and they're not, from broadcasting revenue, from commercial revenue, and some chunk of that will be impacted, and that will hurt the club and hurt our prospects going forward. And the executives would see the same, and those who can would say 12.5%. Fuck, I wouldn't even notice it. Mesut Ozil, Aubameyang, whoever, they won't fucking notice whether they lost 12.5%.
I totally that we agree there, Clive.
Minus the tax, it's probably 6% of what they would see.
I totally. Please understand, just so we're clear, it is an issue of principle for me. It is not an issue of the money, and I do think as you move down through the squad, there are going to be guys for whom. You know, my wife just got hit with a 10% cut, and that was so she could avoid a layoff, and there were massive layoffs in her company. Like there are people who it hits harder and people who it doesn't, but I still don't think that should change whether we are skeptical of and critical of and have. You know what?
It just seems like the Stan. Don't you think though? I understand your point on Stan, but as soon as you throw him into the argument, it's like the argument is lost at that point. And I don't know why.
That's a good point. Can I clarify something? When I say Stan, I think what I mean is KSE. That the organization KSE that owns Arsenal has ways to finance its operation beyond clawing money back from the wages it pays to its employees. And you know, we can argue whether those things are good for the club or not. But again, I just want us all always to not be credulous when a club says, well, we need to take from these well-paid payers to pay these less well-paid employees. Because while that is a very easy argument to be sympathetic to on its face, because, hey, the players are so rich and they have big necklaces and they drive Lamborghinis that are shiny, what we kind of miss in that is that we are letting off the hook quite easily the corporate entities and asset holding class.
They don't have to be the same things, do they? I mean, 12.5% from players just doesn't seem unreasonable. Now, onto the executives. Now, onto KSE.
Yeah, well,
it needs to be a layered approach. At the moment, we've been thrown one layer, and hence our reaction to that layer. And I think the club they haven't managed the message appropriately.
Well, Clive and Tim, I'm sorry, I sidelined you guys.
But is the message manageable given how the media works? I mean, are we just jumping into a theory that there's a major division? And maybe I just haven't followed enough of the coverage.
No, I think we are. We can only do that, Paul, based on what's been thrown at us so far. Because there are things that haven't been forwarded to us. Do you see what I mean?
You know what's interesting, Clive? You know what's really interesting? I think you guys can agree with this. What's really interesting, and I think why I have such a visceral reaction to it in a way. In American sports, you have all the players are unionized. And so all of these things are collectively bargained on behalf of all the players. And so when something is agreed to, you kind of tend to say, well, it was a byproduct of, bilateral agreement in good faith between two parties that were sort of equally represented. And because you don't have that unionization here, and because you have players sort of being targeted for a policy with some social pressure and PR pressure without the benefit of collective bargaining and without the benefit of the representatives, that gets my dander up a little and ticks a lot of my worry boxes. That's my worry box is also a thing that my wife ticks from time to time. But you know what I mean? Does that make sense that like the lack of a collectively bargained agreement here is relevant, I think?
I think it's
Tim, are you awake? By the way, I'm sorry. I just want to.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, man. I've totally hijacked this. I apologize.
And Tim may know more on this than me, but I think this has highlighted the failings of the PFA massively, because they are the players' union and they have been crap. They've been slow. The players had to take charge of their own agreement to with the players together. with the captains getting together, the PFA was slow, taking advice, then maybe this will be a byproduct of all this, that there will be a more unionised approach from the Premier League. And what we're really seeing here is potential. I mean, the potential for the game going forward is just massive. I think we're going to see a real internalisation, a separation of the Premier League from the PFA, having its own organisation, its own union, its own a much sharper agreement of going abroad with our abroad revenue, our streaming. Everything's going to change. Do you think people are going to sit there losing this amount of money and not have a reaction across the globe? No chance. Netflix is coming. It's all coming. It's all coming. Watching football via an app, buying your own season ticket, go onto your phone, season ticket, done. Watch your game. Watch all the things you need to watch. It's coming. There's no people are going to sit there lose this amount of money through no, not their own fault, just a unique circumstance once in our lifetimes, and not be a reaction. The game is going to change to something we barely recognise in the next 2-3 years.
Tim, do you want a final word on this so that I can just stop talking forever?
Yeah, I think the point about the PFA is very, very good. Like, with one pay deferral I would be considering were I a Premier League player right now is my subs to the PFA, as is. Although, I mean, I think the head of the PFA, Gordon Taylor, is kind of, they've been trying to get rid of him for a little while, and I think this will expedite that situation. But I mean, if you were one of the players right now, and you're literally the whole fucking reason I'm a member of this union is so you can sort this kind of thing out. And we all recognise it's a massive, unprecedented situation, but this is your job, and we've had to collectively take the decision to cut you out. It's almost like when a team stops playing for its manager. It's just a bit like, what the fuck are we paying you for? Why are we a member of this union when we've just collectively basically bypassed you all? But it's really, really difficult, and I think it's going to take some time. But unfortunately, I think where I do feel for the players here a bit is the optics of this, because the longer that they go on full pay, whether it's their fault or not, or whether they're trying to do something, like the statement that was kind of put out last week by the players when they kind of bypassed the PFA and said, we're going to give this much to an NHS charity. I mean, that was a rushed statement, and we all understand why they did it. And I bet you my bottom dollar that the logistics of that are weeks and weeks and maybe even months away from actually being realised, because that's a very complicated, payment plan that they've committed to that's going to take some working out. But they put the statement out because they felt under so much pressure to do so, and that's where I kind of feel for the Arsenal players here, and I feel something like that might be coming down the line. Yeah.
Well, we'll see. I mean, I think, look, anytime, let's not be naive. Everything is PR. I mean, remember going back to the Emery and Ozil thing, and Ozil posting social media stuff and then getting pulled back into the squad. So, we if anyone should know PR and sort of these kind of surreptitious PR moves, it should be football fans, because we're inundated with it constantly. Players leaking things to the press, and their agent has a buddy in the press who puts a story out about a transfer rumor, and the clubs briefing things to the press when they know they're going to lose a player. And so we should all be aware of this. And I certainly think that complicating this whole story is the fact that with it out in the public, there's just never going to be a lot of sympathy for millionaires that don't want to give a few millions back. But there is a difference between giving it back voluntarily because you're a good person to a cause of your choice, and having the person who pays you claw it back into their coffers out of a claim that they need it to distribute it a certain way. And I just think we should be mindful that those are different things. Now,
and just like a really quick point on that, please. As well. Players who I listened to the David Ornstein and Mark Chapman podcast, and they interviewed Phil Bardsley, who plays for Burnley, and he was talking about, he was saying stuff like, look, I do charitable things, I do stuff for charity, and I've never spoken about it before, but at the moment I'm in this uncomfortable situation where I feel compelled to, because there's this big spotlight on us. And he's a bit like, I've never, and and of course it's like this never-ending bluff where you say, oh, I don't want to talk about this, and everyone goes, yeah, right, of course you don't. And that's a really uncomfortable position because you can't win, and that's the situation that a lot of players are in at the moment. A lot of them will have made private donations both in this country, in their own countries, and they won't want to talk about that, but this whole situation means they might have to, and then people are going to object to that when they do.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, what if you found out that the players agreed to this, and then by virtue of them agreeing to this, Vinay Venkatesham and Raul Sanlehi and Edu kept all their salaries exactly as they were? Would that sit well? Again, I don't want to go down there. Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, I think some of it is about us and how we view footballers, those working class guys that made good. That's a special talent that we really wish we had, but they are special and they've made good. They come from backgrounds similar to us. We don't question some of the people in the industry. We don't question some of the people that earn ridiculous amounts of money. As far as I'm concerned, and maybe other people will say, no, they earned it. In other industries, we've seen, for example, Richard Branson sort of jump on the bailout, even though he's worth X billion a year, dollars or pounds, for example. We question that, but we don't question it as much as we do Phil Barsley. Do you see what I mean? What he's earning, because of where he comes from. So it's about us as well, and that's why the club needs to be smarter. They need to be smarter about how they approach this. I'll say it again. What's the most important thing to me? That what comes out of all this, and what do we look like as a club, and what's our perception, and what are the key people in the club that we know that are a big part of the future? What do they feel about the club? And so how we act will define that. Sure. And that's why I'm watching really closely.
And the reason why it's sort of funny, guys, because let's be honest, right? This whole idea of like, well, if they give back some of their wages, that's also good for the club long term. They'll be able to buy better players. They'll be able to be more competitive. Sure, that's true. But can I make a sort of obvious point? That was true a year ago. If Mesut Ozil voluntarily took a 50% wage cut because he just wasn't playing very well, that would have been better for the club. But no one expected him to do it. And I believe me, I get the false dichotomy there. I understand why it's, or false, not dichotomy, the opposite. The false, where they're the same thing. but it's just the point that
equivalence.
The false equivalence, right. But at any point, any player, you see this in the NFL a lot. Like Tom Brady won a lot of Super Bowls with the New England Patriots, taking less than the maximum contract he could have, so they could have bought more players. You always have the option to do that. We've run 90 minutes during the coronavirus talking about football issues when there's no football, and we didn't even get to laugh at Spurs. The good news is, it means we can save laughing at Spurs for the next episode we do this week. So we'll just do another episode this week, and we'll laugh at Spurs. I think just as a final point, we can all say, Spurs really fucked this up, and it's funny watching them try to backpedal. Is that fair enough, guys? Quick summary?
So say all of us.
So say we all. Yeah. Amen. I'm going to leave it with Paul first. He's on Twitter at Positive My Pants. And Paul, as always, like when we lock horns, I learn a lot. I get a totally different perspective, and I appreciate it. And so I just want to say thank you for that.
Likewise. Look, I respect your opinion, and you're annoyingly right quite often. So well, I'll leave it at that.
And that is an opinion few people will agree with. Tim's on Twitter at Stoberto. Thanks, Tim.
My pleasure as always.
Clive's on Twitter at ClivePFC. Thanks, Clive.
Thank you very much.
My name's Alex Smith. You can block me on Twitter at Yankee Gunner and also at sympathyformillionaires.com, apparently is where I can be found. But not sympathy for billionaires. Can we draw a line there? I'm not going to keep going. In any event, thanks for hanging with us, everybody. I hope you're doing okay and getting by. And I know we're all experiencing this in different ways, but if these 90 minutes of hearing me yell and scream in any way helped, then you may have a bigger problem than we thought. We love you, and we'll talk to you after Arsenal 20 COVID-19.